Ever get hooked by a business story?
Yes.
When so captivating, you just crave those core insights, the why and the how behind its success, without wading through every single detail.
I think we all have. It's that thirst for the essence, the driving force behind these massive successes.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
You send over Phil Knight's Shoe Dog, this incredible story of how Nike, this global giant, came to be.
And what really strikes me about Knight's story is its honesty, its rawness.
Yeah.
It's not some polished, corporate fairy tale. It's surprisingly vulnerable, a very honest look at how messy building something truly big from scratch can be.
So true. So in this deep dive for you, we're going to extract those crucial elements, those key moments in Knight's journey. We'll explore his initial crazy idea, the birth of Blue Ribbon, the huge obstacles they faced, how Nike finally emerged, and some of Knight's own thoughts looking back on it all.
Sounds good.
Our goal, our mission, is to really distill those key lessons in entrepreneurship, the power of a strong vision, and as you mentioned, that often unpredictable path of creating a global brand. You brought us this fascinating book, so let's unpack what stands out as most insightful and relevant for you.
Okay, let's start with that foundational crazy idea because it really is the source, the heart of everything that follows. Knight's motivation, it wasn't purely about money. It was this deep passion for running and for athletic shoes. It wasn't just a calculated market analysis that set him on this path. It was a deeply personal belief that grew from his own experiences, first as a college track athlete and even as the focus of his academic work.
Right, right. In the beginning, it wasn't about profit. It was this almost idealistic idea of bringing high-quality, affordable Japanese running shoes to America.
Yeah, he truly believed in the product.
Yeah, he saw a gap, a need, and felt this drive to fill it. And it makes you wonder, how often are those long-lasting, successful companies, sparked by that kind of inner drive?
It definitely aligns with what we see in research on other successful companies. Like in Built to Last, the authors talk about this concept of a big, hairy, audacious goal, or BHAG.
Yeah, PHAG.
And when you look at Knight's crazy idea through that lens, you see the similarities. It was inherently long-term, something that would take decades of consistent effort to realize. The level of ambition was huge, no guarantee of success at all. That 50 to 70% chance of success they talk about, it feels very relevant here.
And it wasn't just about profit margins, was it? Knight seems to have been driven by this underlying purpose, this desire to challenge the established athletic shoe industry, which at the time was dominated by Adidas. It required unwavering commitment, as we'll see, and it wasn't static. It involved this constant setting of new goals, new benchmarks to keep the momentum going. So I want to ask you, thinking about your own endeavors, what resonates with you in this concept of a passion-driven, long-term, and highly ambitious goal?
That's the question, isn't it? It's about finding that balance between ambition and grounded action. But moving on, let's look at how that crazy idea started to become reality with the creation of Blue Ribbon. Knight, at just 24, takes this leap of faith, travels to Japan, and basically presents this vision to Onitsuka, the very manufacturer whose shoes he loved. His goal wasn't just to get a supplier. He was imagining a partnership that could one day take on Adidas.
And the origin of the name Blue Ribbon, it's bold.
Right.
Right? Taking inspiration from his childhood track ribbons, it's such a statement for a company that at that point didn't even really exist.
Right.
It
Yeah.
embodies that fake it till you make it attitude. Although, to be fair, the book does offer a balanced perspective on the ethics of that and suggests alternative, honest approaches.
Right.
But you have to admire the audacity.
For sure. But what truly pushed Blue Ribbon forward in those early days was the partnership with Bill Bowerman, Knight's old college track coach. This wasn't just a typical buyer-seller relationship. Bowerman was an innovator himself, really deep into the science and performance of running shoes.
Absolutely. Bowerman wasn't satisfied with just being a customer. He wanted to be a part of it, actively involved. And that initial agreement, the 5149 split, with Knight having the operational control, that turned out to be a game changer.
Definitely.
You had these two people with different but perfectly matched skills. Knight with the big picture business vision, and Bowerman with this deep understanding of the product. They were literally selling shoes from their car trunks at track meets. And the response, it was immediate. People loved it.
It's amazing.
They were selling out so fast they could barely keep up with reorders. It really shows what can happen when you have a co-founder who brings something completely different but equally valuable to the table.
And as Blue Ribbon started gaining traction from 1963 to 68, they hit some new roadblocks. The first shipment of shoes was delayed, which forced Knight to find a regular job, leading him to accounting and becoming a CPA.
Which, looking back, probably gave him crucial knowledge about the financial side of running a business.
Oh, for sure.
But you can imagine that initial frustration, having this exciting venture, but waiting for the actual product to arrive. When the Onitsuka shoes finally landed, Knight sent samples to Bowerman right away. That just shows how crucial Bowerman was from the start.
It's important to remember the context, too. In the 60s, running wasn't the mainstream activity it is today. So the market for specialized running shoes was pretty limited, mainly student athletes. This, of course, restricted Blue Ribbon's customer base early on. Plus, getting funding was a whole different challenge back then. Banks, the main source of startup capital, had different priorities than today's venture capitalists. They wanted quick profits and steady, controlled growth, not those risky, high-reward ventures.
Which must have been tough for Knight, who clearly wanted to expand in a big way. And that's where their first salesman, Johnson, comes in. His methods were, well, let's just say a little unconventional. Those constant letters packed with details.
Oh, yeah.
Even with Knight's initial doubts and his hands-off approach to management. Don't tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do and let them surprise you. Johnson really delivered. Why do you think Johnson was so successful? Was it his persistence, those detailed reports, or something else about how he connected with customers?
That's a great question. I think it was a mix of things. His constant communication showed real commitment, and his detailed reports gave Knight valuable insights into what customers wanted and what was happening in the market, insights he might have missed otherwise. This feedback loop was essential. Plus, Johnson's own passion for running and his genuine connection with people probably built trust and led to sales. And Knight letting him work autonomously without micromanaging allowed Johnson's unique strength to shine. Even his push to open that first store in LA, despite Knight's initial reservations, turned out to be huge for building that direct connection with runners. It shows how important it is to trust your team's instincts and the feedback they get on the ground.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how Blue Ribbon could have this huge sales growth as they entered the late 60s and early 70s, yet still be operating on such tight margins that Knight couldn't even pay himself a salary at first. It really speaks to his dedication, his unwavering belief in the company's future.
It does. This financial pressure probably pushed him to leave his accounting job and teach at Portland State University. The more flexible schedule gave him more time to focus on Blue Ribbon's growth. It was during this time that Penny Parks, a student in one of his classes, joined the company and became this incredibly valuable early employee, managing operations with amazing enthusiasm and skill. It highlights how crucial those early hires are, people who not only have the skills but also really believe in the company's mission and are willing to go the extra mile.
Then there's the almost chance meeting with Carolyn Davidson, the design student who would later create the iconic Nike swoosh. Back then, it probably seems like a small thing, but it shows how these seemingly insignificant events can have huge, lasting consequences. But underneath this outward success, this growth, and these important new hires, there was growing unease about their relationship with Onitsuka. What do you think sparked Knight's suspicions?
It seems to have been a combination of subtle changes in how Kitami and Onitsuka communicated and acted. Knight probably sensed a growing distance, maybe a reluctance to share information or a change in tone. This, along with his understanding of the competitive business world, probably led him to suspect that Onitsuka might be looking at other ways to distribute their shoes in the U.S., which was becoming a big market. This led to the somewhat unusual decision to bring in Fujimoto as an inside man to keep an eye on Onitsuka, a practice the book suggests was more common in Japanese business culture at the time.
It's an interesting look into the complexities of international business partnerships and how important it is to be aware of different cultural norms and underlying motives. Then Kitami's visit to the U.S. in 1971 seemed to confirm those suspicions. The mixed messages pushing for more sales while criticizing Blue Ribbon's growth and expressing doubt about Knight's trading company idea out of fear of intellectual property theft, it all suggested a strategy on Onitsuka's part. What specific things that Kitami did stood out to you as the most telling?
The demand for more sales while also criticizing their already impressive growth, it hints at wanting to squeeze out as much profit as possible before potentially ending the partnership. The skepticism about the trading company idea, framed as worry over intellectual property theft, feels almost like setting the stage for their own actions later. It showed a lack of trust and maybe a plan to capitalize on the market Blue Ribbon had built. But the real turning point, the undeniable proof of Onitsuka's intentions, came when they found that list of potential U.S. distributors in Kitami's briefcase. After years of dedicated work building the Onitsuka brand in the US, even helping to improve designs, that feeling of betrayal must have been immense, basically forcing Knight's hand and setting the stage for Nike.
1972 marks that pivotal moment, that huge shift. They announced the launch of Nike at the National Sporting Goods Association show in Chicago, a move that seems almost perfectly timed to coincide with Onitsuka's public statements about possibly buying Blue Ribbon. It was a bold statement, basically saying, "You want to buy us, we're creating our own future." But the initial launch of Nike wasn't without its hiccups, right? The bright orange boxes were definitely eye-catching, but the first Nike shoes themselves, well, apparently they had some quality problems.
That's crucial to remember. While that vibrant packaging was meant to stand out, the quality of the first Nike shoes wasn't quite there. Some said they looked cheap, with shiny finishes and logos that weren't applied consistently. This could have really hurt the new brand.
Absolutely.
What do you think helped them overcome those early product issues?
It seems like the positive reputation Blue Ribbon had already built played a big part. Buyers and retailers already had a good feeling about the people behind this new brand. The trust they'd earned over years of selling Onitsuka shoes gave them some breathing room while they worked on improving manufacturing. It shows how important a strong reputation is, how it can provide that resilience even when facing unexpected issues with a new product. And Katami's surprise question, what's Nike? And Knight's, well, let's say, strategic explanation adds a layer of irony to the whole situation. Then you have the introduction of Steve Prefontaine, a legend in American track and field, as Nike's National Director of Public Affairs. How big was this endorsement for the brand at that early stage?
Prefontaine's involvement was huge. He brought instant credibility and visibility, especially within the running world. At a time when Olympic athletes had strict limits on what they could earn from endorsements, his passionate support for a relatively unknown brand like Nike was priceless. He wasn't just a paid spokesperson, he genuinely believed in the product. His fame and his vocal support helped them cut through the clutter and reach their target audience. It's interesting to see how Knight managed things internally during this period, that certain reserve, that lack of outward praise, even as they were becoming more successful. Despite this, the team around him remained dedicated.
And while sales were growing fast, the company was still working on super tight run-ins, even facing periods of actual financial loss. Knight's strategy of constantly reinvesting profits back into the business, while essential for long-term growth, understandably worried some potential investors. Then you had the added stress of the legal battles, Onitsuka suing them for breach of contract, and Nike countersuing, creating a complicated and potentially damaging situation.
But the financial situation in 75 really shows just how precarious their situation was. Living paycheck to paycheck, with one late payment threatening to bring everything down, even having bounced checks, it paints a picture of the immense financial strain Knight and his team were under. The Bank of California deciding to end their relationship must have felt like a huge blow, making things even harder. Yet, in the middle of all this chaos, they officially incorporate as Nike Inc., with Knight defining their goal as simply winning. That competitive spirit seems to have been a driving force throughout. Even the disappointment at the 76 Olympics, seeing an athlete who had worn Nike switch back to Onitsuka for the marathon, shows how deeply personal Knight's investment in the brand's success was.
But that same year also saw a major turning point with the success of the Nike waffle trainers. What made this particular shoe so revolutionary?
The waffle trainer changed the game. It was a genuinely new design, offering better traction and a lighter feel for runners. Bowerman's ingenuity, inspired by his wife's waffle iron, resulted in a sole that truly improved performance. But it wasn't just for athletes. It became popular for everyday wear and fashion. This broader appeal was something their competitors struggled to match consistently, and it marked a real shift for Nike, significantly widening their market.
And as Nike became more recognized nationwide, those endorsements from college teams and coaches, even with the occasional funny mix-up, were key to solidifying their place in the athletic world. Then you had those early endorsements in tennis, with someone like John McEnroe, and even appearances in pop culture, like Farrah Fawcett wearing Nikes and Charlie's Angels. Those moments must have been a huge boost for brand awareness. It's touching to read about his father finally recognizing Nike's success and what that validation meant tonight.
It is. Those endorsements and pop culture moments helped Nike go from a niche athletic brand to something much bigger, a cultural phenomenon. And they kept innovating, even with products that didn't quite hit the mark, like Bowerman's LD1000 shoe. But how they handled the recall, proactively and responsibly, likely strengthened customer trust and showed they cared about quality. Then came the big challenge of the dispute with U.S. Customs over import duties, a financial hurdle that threatened their growth. How did Nike handle this complex situation?
They fought back on multiple fronts, really strategically. They didn't just accept it. They launched their own line of cheaper shoes called One Line, which gave a more affordable option while also addressing some of the customs concerns. Then they ran a PR campaign portraying themselves as this small Oregon company battling the government, which probably resonated with people. And maybe most importantly, they filed an antitrust lawsuit against their bigger competitors, arguing that the import rules were unfairly targeting them. This aggressive, multi-pronged approach got them a favorable settlement, removing a major roadblock on their way to becoming a publicly traded company.
Thinking about the later parts of Knight's story, what stands out to you about how Nike became the global giant it is today?
Well, Knight stepping down as CEO in 2006 sort of marks the end of an era, but by then, Nike's growth was just phenomenal. Billions in sales each year, a huge global presence with stores and employees all over the world, and massive manufacturing, mainly in China. It's a testament to that initial crazy idea and decades of relentless work.
It really is.
The world headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon, with buildings named after key figures like Bowerman, Prefontaine, Woods, and Ham, it's a physical reminder of the people who made that success possible. And the fact that new employees are still interested in the company's history, it speaks to that lasting spirit of Nike that Knight built. Those personal stories of gratitude from athletes like LeBron James and Michael Jordan, they highlight the deep relationships that were formed and the huge impact Nike had on the world of sports. Even in the face of personal tragedy like the loss of his son Matthew, the support from the Nike family, especially Tiger Woods' immediate response, shows that strong sense of community and loyalty that Knight fostered. And finally, Knight's reflection on the whole journey, that feeling of being guided by something bigger, adds this really fascinating, almost philosophical layer to the story.
So, having taken this deep dive into Phil Knight's shoe dog using the material you provided, what would you say are the most important lessons or takeaways for our listener?
For me, it really emphasizes how powerful it is to start with genuine passion, a crazy idea you truly believe in. But it also shows that building something significant is rarely straightforward or easy. It's messy, unpredictable, full of challenges, and you come close to failing sometimes. The importance of building a strong team with diverse skills, all united behind a shared vision, along with the ability to adapt and keep going when things are uncertain, that seems absolutely crucial. And ultimately, it highlights that creating a global brand that lasts is a long game. It takes constant dedication and a refusal to quit.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive has given us a peek into how Nike began, showing that complex mix of vision, perseverance, and the power of human connection.
As you think about Phil Knight's journey, I want you to consider this. What crazy idea might you have? One that's maybe simmering below the surface, one you've brushed aside as too bold or unrealistic? What small, initial, maybe imperfect steps could you take to start exploring its potential? Remember that long-term perspective of a BAG. What could that look like for you?